Today on Market Journal, to fallow or not to fallow? We'll take a look at research that's finding the answer to that question. Sufficient water is important for a good wheat crop, but are recent storms too much of a good thing? We'll break down what this extra moisture means for you. And it's time to get techie. The USDA needs participation on a new project for gathering planted acres with precision ag. Learn how you can take part. This week's edition of Market Journal starts right now.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.
Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hey everyone, I'm Troy Moling, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Glad you could be with us today. Lots to talk about on this week's show, so let's jump right in. Beginning this week's broadcast, and farming out in western Nebraska can be difficult when there's not a lot of water to go around. While fallow has been a solution to the problem in the past, researchers are now looking into using other crops to conserve water and help boost wheat profitability. Here's Market Journal's Mattie McIntosh.
Over the years, many dryland farmers in western Nebraska have sought to improve their water conservation practice by switching from conventional tillage fallow to no-till chem fallow. This past year, Nebraska Extension educator Strahinja Stepanovic started a research project looking into alternatives for fallow in order to further improve water balance and profitability.
So dryland agriculture in western part of Nebraska, when I say western part of Nebraska, I mean west of North Platte, has been gradually changing towards abandoning fallow acres. Now there's several reasons for that. One of the major ones, there's certainly certain weeds started developing resistance to herbicides, so maintaining that fallow weed free has been associated with increased expenses of spraying. And then also a lot of guys switch to summer tilling, and that's not always good because then you destroy the soil aggregates and you don't save as much water for the next crop. So what are the alternatives? Switching to continuous cropping systems, a lot of guys actually switch to continuous corn. And but there's, again, a number of farmers that wanted to keep that rotation in place. So they actually decided to keep that, instead of fallow, do short season crops. So 5 years ago, the field pea started picking up. 2 years ago, chickpeas started picking up. And every once in a while, we'll see dryland soybeans in certain places as well. So the objective of this study is actually to look at how the field peas, chickpeas, and soybeans compare to fallow in terms of water balance and effects on next year's wheat yield and wheat protein content, and kind of made that comparison.
Upon completion of the first round of the project, there were clear results between the field pea, chickpea, soybean, and fallow sections of the test plot.
When you think about crop water use efficiency, how much bushel did that crop actually produce for the amount of water it used, the soybeans was very inefficient. And the soybean produced 18 bushels and took about 18 inches of water. So that's very, very inefficient, and it's harvesting in October, so you're not gonna have as much chances to get the wheat planted. Field peas and chickpeas are really a little bit better. They had about 30 bushels of yield, and they used about 10 inches of water. So they were a little bit more water use efficient. And another beneficial things with chickpeas or field peas is that they're going to be harvested earlier, so you're going to let a little bit of time out there for that groundwater, for that soil moisture profile to replenish. Now that doesn't usually happen as often, with August, dry August that we typically have, but you at least give yourself a chance.
While the water balance methods from this project can be used across the state, there are key differences when applying the method in eastern Nebraska.
In eastern Nebraska, it would be a little bit different story. They don't do fallow and dryland. They have so much rain. Our annual rainfall in western Nebraska is like 18, and where I'm at is southwest Nebraska. As you go panhandle, it's even less. But out here, if you're able, like we were this morning in a field and we looked at peas that are already 6 inches tall and the soybeans that just started cracking up. And having that ground cover early on and a crop growing with all this moisture we have, they're going to use that moisture and they're going to turn it into a yield. And if you're going to have an opportunity out there to harvest that early July, then there's another opportunity of 3 to 4 months to take advantage of that growing season when it's really nice and hot to plant double crops such as forages, forage sorghum, proso millet, sunflower, short season soybean, short season corn, grain sorghum. And we actually had the really good results from our first year. And I would encourage farmers from eastern Nebraska to look at how this double cropping system works here.
Strahenia says he's excited to see how wheat will be affected in the coming years of the project. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mattie McIntosh.
Moving on, and reporting your field acreage for the USDA has always been something producers have to do, but with new technology, this time-consuming job is becoming easier every year. Now the USDA needs growers in 19 Nebraska counties to participate in a project that uses precision ag data to report that acreage. The project is only being done in Nebraska and aims to make the reporting process more streamlined and secure.
They're going to call one of our participating offices, say I want to be involved, and what's going to happen is we're going to direct them to that third-party technology provider that we work with. There's a secure producer portal, and they do a quick registration. They upload their information from their precision ag equipment using either a flash drive or a cloud-based system. And then they're going to go through a step-by-step process on that portal just to basically review that information, confirm it.
After the numbers are submitted, the information will be transmitted to the FSA. The producer will still need to stop by their local FSA office to certify the collected data is correct. But the time-saving benefits won't go unnoticed.
They've got to do it because we want them to be able to access our programs as well as crop insurance. So yeah, let's see if we can make that process easier. The goal here is to save producers time, redundancy, and paperwork. It's information that they're already capturing in their equipment, so why not utilize that information to save them time from sitting in our office for a long period of time. We can do a lot of it behind the scenes before they even get in the door.
The deadlines for acreage reporting is July 15th. More information and a map of those 19 counties can be found online at fsa.usda.gov/NE. The information can also be found on the Market Journal website. And it's time for markets, and let's get a check of those now. The June WASDE report offered some changes to the corn crop. Ending stocks are forecast to be at levels we haven't seen in a number of years. Other things we'll talk about today: no new tariffs for Mexico, but negotiations with China are still ongoing, and there's some signs the economy is slowing down. How will that impact beef? On Tuesday, I was joined by Dr. Scott Brown, an ag economist with University of Missouri Extension. We began by breaking down the findings from the latest WASDE report.
It's good that we see USDA now out talking about some of the changes, especially on the corn side. Today's report gave us a 10 bushel drop in U.S. corn yields projected for this year. So they went from a 176 to a 166 in the last 30 days. They also chopped about 3 million acres off of corn area planted this year. So the combination of things, about a 1.35 billion bushel cut in corn production expected by USDA this year. I mean, I think we're still early in the process. All of that raised USDA's projected corn price for the crop we harvest this fall by 50 cents. So now talking about a 380 price where they were at 330 before. It just reminds us of how much things have tightened up as a result of the bad weather situation. ending stocks at now projected at levels that we haven't seen since 2013, 2014. So what an amazing change has happened over the last 45 days as weather has really delayed a lot of that corn crop, whether it's flooding or just wet in total. It's really created a very difficult situation, and I think we're going to continue to chase this corn crop until we get it in the bin in terms of figuring out what happens to yields ultimately, because even the corn we have in the ground I think's had a pretty slow start.
Yeah, you bet. As far as trade or ag policy, is there anything that you're watching closely on that front that you want to let us know about?
Well, I think when we look at the trade side, of course, the USMCA agreement is always one that's we're paying attention to. I guess I back up for a minute and say it's nice that we're probably not going to talk about any new tariffs on Mexico that might have caused them to retaliate on ag products for us. So it seems like probably going to get some more pork that might move to Mexico, hams in particular. But having that market without new tariffs in place is certainly helpful. And of course, getting a successful USMCA agreement in place should be helpful to U.S. agriculture. China continues to be the one we watch. If we can get a U.S.-China agreement in place, what does that mean with the cuts in the Chinese pork herd that we see today, in excess of 20% at least, it seems like at this point in time? Their need for soybeans might be less than we saw earlier, but it doesn't mean a new China-U.S. agreement doesn't mean positive things for things like beef and pork in particular. As pork production in China is reduced as a result of African swine fever, our products might have a chance to see increases as we go forward here in 2019.
Yeah, and let's talk about cattle for a couple minutes. What are some of the top questions that you're getting from cattle producers this time of year? Because we are right into grilling season. What do you tell them?
Well, I think we need to keep watching the domestic demand front of things. If I had a caution, it's to be paying attention there. We know we've seen just a few signs of the economy maybe starting to slow. The last jobs report certainly wasn't as positive as we'd hoped. Consumer confidence fell a little bit in the last report as well. We need strong domestic demand on the beef side because we're going to talk about increases in beef production this year. We've got feedlots that are fairly full of cattle. So I guess I keep saying there's more downside risk in these cattle markets moving forward than upside potential. I suppose one of the real positives could be to come back with a U.S.-Japan bilateral agreement. I think that certainly could be helpful on the beef side, getting our tariffs that we face on products going into Japan on an equivalent basis with other countries like Australia, I think would grow that market. When we've seen the first 4 months of this year, beef exports below year-ago levels, it just reminds me that we're getting drag in terms of that export side, and we need all the help we can get on that beef side with the additional supplies that are going to be coming to the marketplace for the remainder of 2019.
Yeah, and there's just so much volatility all around. Any other marketing advice, risk management tips that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to leave us with this week?
Well, Troy, I think it's most important for folks just to decide to do some risk management. If they're waiting to hit the highs, if it's the prices they're selling, or hit the lows, if it's the prices that they're purchasing products for, I go, don't try to hit those extremes. Find a risk management plan that works for you and stick with it. At the end of the day, we hope we don't actually execute on that risk management strategy very often. We hope prices actually move in better direction than we anticipated. When you think of the crop side, I worry there's more upside potential in corn prices as we move forward. It's already been a slow start. We just really don't know what we're going to get as a result of the weather. Hay stocks at record low levels, and I have yet to find a producer at this point that's put hay up so far this year without it getting wet at some point along the way. So I think hay continues to be an issue. So feed costs could be higher. I worry there's more downside risk in cattle markets than upside potential. You know, if both of those things happen, we get higher feed costs and lower cattle prices, I worry about the bottom line for our producers in many parts of the country.
Dr. Scott Brown, as always, great talking with you today. We appreciate it.
You bet, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Next week, we'll be joined by Jeff Peterson, president of Heartland Farm Partners. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Time now for this week's trivia question, and this week is about cattle. We all know Nebraska is a leader when it comes to beef, so we want to know how many cattle are in the state for every one person. Is the answer 2, 3, 4, or is it 5? Make your guess, and I'll have the answer after Al's forecast. Next, it isn't difficult to find anecdotal evidence of the benefits of cover crops in a cropping system. Researchers and on-farm trials are showing varied methods that work. But how do cover crops pencil out in the long run? Well, one Northwest Cedar County farmer is trying to figure it out, at least on his own farm. In the June Nebraska Farmer, read about the economics and get a breakdown of the dollars and cents behind how cover crops have worked on Jeff Steffen's farm in Northwest Cedar County. Well, it's time now for weather with Al Dutcher. Al, how are things shaping up for the week ahead?
Well, Troy, you're absolutely correct. We've basically seen the cool weather last week, and we're looking for this week to see a little bit better of a warm-up as we go through this next 7-day period. We're going to have to deal with showers around the area, particularly this weekend. We've had some good rains in the last week across portions of the state. Last weekend, the big winner was south central and central Nebraska. Generally between 3/4 of an inch and 2 inches was reported. We've seen some other activity during the middle of the week as another reinforcing cold front came through the state, dropped some precipitation across east central southeast Nebraska is the most concentrated area. Between 1/4 and 3/4 inch was very commonly reported. Then we had the thunderstorm development over this last 24 hours, and we expect to see some of that continue on to today. So as we go to the upper air models, what we notice is that we have a trough in the mid layers of the atmosphere moving through the region. It's going to tap some of that Gulf moisture and redevelop thunderstorm activity as we see the trough in the Great Lakes wane. So surface low develops in the Texas Panhandle. Big fetch of moisture streaming toward the north. With the warmer conditions, we'll see that warm front lift to our region, bringing thunderstorm activity to much of the eastern half of the state and much humid conditions. And then by tomorrow, we start to see another trough moving through the region, a little bit farther south than the trough that will move through today. We'll see low pressure once again in the Texas Panhandle and to the east of us. That will help increase the flow. So we're going to get a convergence zone across northern Kansas, southern Nebraska with thunderstorm activity expected, particularly during the first half of the day. And then that trough begins to move toward the east. That should take some of the moisture with us, but we do see another low pressure system trying to develop in the Texas Panhandle. There's just not a lot of support for it, as most of the heavy concentrated precipitation will remain to our south. And then as we get into the day Tuesday, now we start to see the trough starting to slip into the northern Rockies and will start to deepen during the week. Low pressure across the Dakotas, eastern Montana, and then one across the Texas Panhandle will be the focal area for thunderstorm activity in the southern plains and across the northern plains. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of drought relief in the Dakotas, in North Dakota especially. On Wednesday, we see a piece of energy moving into this trough, digging much deeper. We see a surface low starting to develop in the Intermountain Basin and one across south central Kansas. Once again, that'll start to funnel moisture northward. Looks like southern Nebraska once again will be on the northern periphery of the precipitation, and then we'll also see another secondary boundary across South Dakota. On Thursday, this trough digs a little bit farther into the western United States. The big main surface low associated with this trough lays in the Intermountain region, and then we see another surface low starting to develop in the Texas Panhandle that will start to lift precipitation toward the northeast, once again targeting northern Kansas and eastern Kansas. By Friday, this trough really starts to strengthen, and we start to see a movement toward the east. We also see the forecast for low developing in northeastern Colorado, so a big, deep fetch of moisture comes northward. The main concentrated area right now depicted is across the northern Rockies, but this is expected to fill in as we progress through next weekend, and I would not be surprised once again that we will see another severe weather outbreak in the central plains. So overall, as we look to the 8 to 14-day forecast from next Thursday to the following Tuesday, with that low coming in, below normal temperatures across the northern Rockies, and precipitation well above normal to the central Rockies, central plains northward. So overall, looks like we're going to be dealing with hit and miss showers to our north and our south, possibly some of them hitting Nebraska, and overall a slightly warmer trend as we go through this next 7-day period.
Thanks, Al. Back to trivia now, and this week we asked, for every one person in Nebraska, how many cattle are there? The answer is B. Cattle outnumber people 3 to 1. Next up, it's been an interesting growing season for wheat, with a moderate fall, dry winter, and now a soggy spring. And disease is presenting new challenges as we get closer to harvest. Market Journal's Bill Dodd is looking into what wheat producers have been dealing with and what they should be on the lookout for. Bill, what have you got for us today?
Thanks, Troy. As we all know, we had quite the transition from winter to spring, and that's been especially true for many wheat producers in the state. Now, many are going to be gearing up for harvest after a late planting season, and aside from the wild weather, late planting has probably been the biggest setback for most producers. This year's wheat production is looking fairly stable, despite 7% of the crop looking poor to very poor. And winter wheat heading is only reported at 69%, which is behind last year's 86% and well under the 89% average for this time of year. With somewhat of a predictable fall and winter precipitation coming in late with record amounts of moisture, many producers had a hard time with their crop this year. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Nebraska Extension Dryland Cropping Systems Specialist Cody Creech and got his take on how the late moisture we received this winter was too much for some producers and a blessing in disguise for others.
Really, I think the biggest thing from the winter is we started off the fall pretty good with moisture, and then it was really dry for a number of months through November into January, and then finally winter finally showed up late, but it came with moisture, and that was the biggest thing that we got out of the winter was the moisture. It was very much needed. There is a few areas up in the northwest corner of the Panhandle that had some winter kill. And I guess the other thing would be where we had a lot of rain, we had some ponding which killed a little bit of the wheat in some of those lower areas. But overall, the wheat came out of the winter looking pretty good.
With all the added moisture late in the season, many producers are beginning to see too much of a good thing. While wetter weather was a welcome sight after a dry winter, it's recently contributed to other problems. Wheat disease had been low throughout the spring in Nebraska, but a number of reported cases are on the rise and are expected to keep rising. Surveys of wheat fields in southeast Nebraska during the week of June 3rd revealed a compelling escalation in disease from the previous weeks. With different wheat diseases from neighboring states turning up in Nebraska, Extension plant pathologist Stephen Wagulo tells me now is the time to stay vigilant when examining your fields.
In the southern states, for example, in Kansas, they have leaf rust. In Oklahoma, they have a lot of leaf rust. The spores have blown north from southern states. So scouting should continue. Look out for leaf rust, but also the fungal leaf spots, tan spot and septoria. Time a fungicide application to protect the flag leaf, but more importantly, to protect against Fusarium head blight.
On June 4th, stripe rust had been identified in a state variety trial field in Washington County. On June 5th, bacterial leaf streak, leaf rust, and stripe rust were in the beginning stages of development at the Eastern Nebraska Research and Extension Center near Meade. Furthermore, leaf rust and fungal leaf spots were detected at moderate to severe levels, while Fusarium head blight was present at the Havelock Research Farm on June 6th in trace amounts. However, those amounts are expected to increase, and while there aren't really any options to preempt any of these diseases, there are steps you can take once the disease is spotted in your crop.
The level of disease that you're seeing actually determines the type of action that you're going to take. The flag leaf contributes the most to yield, and therefore we time fungicide application to protect the flag leaf. So if the upper leaves are free of disease, you probably are better off to wait. Don't go and spray right away. But with the weather that we have right now, the disease that is of most concern is Fusarium head blight. It affects wheat heads, and it appears shortly after flowering. So 7 or so days after flowering, you see heads bleached, and that's Fusarium head blight. So the best strategy right now is for growers to wait until the wheat is headed and has started flowering. And at that time, just apply one spray of a fungicide, and that will take care of both Fusarium head blight and the leaf diseases like the fungal leaf spots and the leaf rust.
As far as what fungicides to apply, Stephen tells me products that are most effective on all of these diseases are Procero, Cambra, and Miravis Ace. As always, producers should make sure to read and follow the label instructions and restrictions before application. And most importantly to note, once the field is past the flowering stage, it will be too late to apply any fungicides at that point. So right now is going to be the best time to check on those fields and take any necessary action before it's too late. And Troy, that's what I've got my eye on this week. For now, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Bill. For our final story today, maybe you have extra land you don't know what to do with, or maybe you want to make a deal with a local brewery. Whatever the reason, hops can be difficult to get into if you don't know what to expect. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln provides beginning hops workshops to those interested in getting started. Here's Market Journal's Mattie McIntosh with more.
Some people will do specialty crops such as hops. It's just a hobby or something that they would like to do, but we also want to see if there's a way we can perhaps increase our home income.
On the last day of May, Associate Professor of Agronomy and Horticulture Stacy Adams stood in front of a group of growers and talked about the basics of growing hops. During this introductory workshop, he discussed what to consider when setting up a hops plot, how to make a plan for a trial planting phase, and what problems to expect during the first year of growing.
Everybody's kind of just exploring hops. I don't have any commercial growers yet in here. So we're going to be basically ground zero in this presentation and all these.
While the growers at this workshop aren't currently looking to grow hops commercially, they learned how hops can be used for more than just beer, such as in medicine, clothing, and floral design.
Homeopathic medicines can utilize this because it can be used as a sleep aid and an estrogen replacement. I was in China.
The workshop ended with a walking tour of the East Campus Hop Yard, where participants were able to see what a plot looks like in production. If you weren't able to attend this workshop but are interested in growing hops, a Hop Yard Field Day will take place on June 22nd at Oak Creek Hops in Kearney, Nebraska. Participants can see a commercial hop yard in action, talk to the owners about the crop, and share their own experiences with other growers. The event is free and open to the public, but registration is required. For more information and to sign up, visit agronomy.unl.edu/Nebraska-hops.
Definitely something to check out if you're interested. And that was Market Journal's Mattie McIntosh reporting. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. On next week's show, when life gets stressful, depression can take control over your life. And farmers aren't immune. We'll examine this very serious topic and look at some ways to cope. That story and a whole lot more. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thank you so much for watching. And to all the dads out there, have a happy Father's Day.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.